Today, the president made what are widely called unusual, perhaps unprecedented remarks in the modern era. And I'm going to show you exactly what he said and why military veterans and many other experts on a nonpartisan basis say this is one of those inflection points you need to confront. It is unusual to gather this many members of the military in peacetime. The president made this public address so everyone can see and hear what he is saying to the military. And he explicitly said this military under this Trump administration must better focus on attacking, quote, the enemy within. And as for the controversial and sometimes legally overruled use of the National Guard in America, the president rhetorically pushing past that.
What does it take for a four-star Marine like John Kelly to go public and say Trump called fallen troops suckers and losers? Because if that's true, that's not normal trash talk. That's the commander-in-chief spitting on the military's whole code. And here's the part people miss. This isn't just one angry guy. It's hundreds of retired generals and national security leaders saying, out loud, this man is a threat to American democracy. So what did they see behind closed doors that made them break the stay quiet rule? Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. If you really want to know why all these generals finally opened their mouths, start with a nasty little question. What did they hear in private that you and I didn't? Because these people are trained to shut up. They don't do cable news drama. They don't toss endorsements around like confetti. The whole point is the military stays nonpartisan, so everybody trusts it. When that many high-ranking retirees break that norm, it's like the fire alarm going off in a building full of firefighters. So picture the room. You've got the so-called adults, John Kelly, James Mattis, and other senior brass, doing normal national security stuff. Real topics, real stakes, maps, briefings, the kind of meetings where people actually read the folder in front of them. And then you've got Donnie Diapers, sitting there like it's a reality show reunion, turning every serious moment into a vibe check. Not what's the plan, but are you with me? Not what does the law say, but who's loyal? That's the big clash. Military leaders are raised on one North Star, the Constitution. Not a person, not a party, not a brand. You can disagree with the policy, you can argue strategy all day, but the loyalty is supposed to go up the chain to the law. And what they say they saw was Grumpy Trumpy trying to flip that, like the chain of command should end at his ego. And that's why the suckers and losers story hits like a brick. This isn't a random tweet war. John Kelly is a four-star Marine. He's also a Gold Star father. His son died serving. So when Kelly confirms that Trump allegedly called fallen service members suckers and losers, that's not gossip. That's a man who knows exactly what those graves cost, telling you this crossed a line. People can argue politics forever, but you don't toss that kind of claim around if you're not dead serious. Now, a normal president, when a general pushes back, will fight it on policy. They'll say, I hear you, but we're doing it this way. They'll negotiate, they'll pressure, that's politics. But with the orange turd, the move is different. He doesn't go after the argument, he goes after the person. When Mattis criticized him, Trump didn't say, here's why my plan is better. He called Mattis the world's most overrated general. That's not debate. That's a middle school insult with nuclear codes nearby. And it wasn't a one-off. There's a pattern these military people watched over and over. He trashes Gold Star families. He attacks POWs. He uses service members as props for a photo, then acts confused when they don't clap like trained SEALs. It's like he thinks a uniform is just a costume that comes with free applause. So imagine being an officer who spent decades learning restraint. You don't clap at rallies. You don't do partisan talk in uniform. You don't put troops in a spot where they look like they're picking a team. Then your boss keeps nudging, basically, yeah, the Constitution, sure. But are you with ME? That's the moment the adults in the room realize this isn't just a different management style. It's a loyalty test. And here's where it stops being about feelings. These retired generals and admirals weren't just offended. They were worried about the military being treated like a personal power tool. Like if he gets mad at a critic, the question becomes, can I point the force at the problem? That's the nightmare scenario for a democracy, because then rights don't feel like rights anymore. They feel like a favor. That's the first reason over 340 of them went public. Not because they suddenly love politics, because they watch the loyalty game up close, and they think it ends with the military serving one guy, not the country. And once you get that, the next part gets even weirder, because some of them say he didn't just disrespect troops, he sounded like he admired a dictator. So here's the curiosity gap. What does a 4-star have to hear before he goes, "Okay, I'm done staying quiet"? Because these guys aren't Twitter warriors. They're not trying to sell a book with a spicy chapter. They were in the room. They sat through the briefings, the side chats, the little moments where Donnie Diapers treats power like a TV remote. Volume up, volume down, switch the channel, blame the remote when nothing works. And a lot of them kept their mouths shut for years, because that's the culture. You don't make the military look like it's in a food fight. Then John Kelly goes to the New York Times and says something that makes your stomach drop. Kelly says Trump privately asked why his generals couldn't be like Hitler's generals. Let that sit there for a second. Not strong leaders, in some vague way. Not tough negotiators. Hitler. Kelly says he was stunned, like the kind of silence where you can hear everyone's brain buffering. And Kelly isn't some random guy guessing. He's a retired 4-star Marine general. He served in combat. He lost his son in Afghanistan. He also ran the White House as chief of staff, which is basically being the adult supervising a toddler with a Sharpie near the Constitution. So when he says he heard it, this isn't a rumor bouncing around a group chat. It's witness testimony from a person who knows exactly what was said and how it was meant. Why does this set off alarm bells for career military leaders? Because their whole education is basically, here's how democracies die. They study dictators. They study coups. They study what happens when the armed forces stop being a national institution and become a leader's personal muscle. Once that happens, elections are just decorations. Courts become suggestions. And if you think that sounds dramatic, go look at any country where the army becomes the ruler's favorite toy. It doesn't end with better parades. Kelly didn't just say the Hitler thing. He also told the Times Trump falls into the general definition of fascist for sure, and that he admires people who are dictators. That's not a label people like Kelly toss around because they're mad. In that world, words like fascist aren't used like jerk or clown. They're used like a warning sign on a bridge that's starting to crack. And it wasn't just Kelly. The reporting in the same vein includes senior figures like Mark Milley, with the private assessment of Trump as fascist to the core. Again, that's Pentagon language, not a campaign slogan. When someone that high says that in private, they're not trying to win an argument online. They're talking like a doctor looking at a scan and saying, yeah, that's not good. Now take it from foreign dictator talk to right here at home. Part of what freaked them out was the vibe of using troops inside the US, treating American cities like a battlefield. Because once a president starts thinking that way, your rights can start to feel conditional, like they depend on the boss's mood that day. Protest turns into domestic enemy. Dissent turns into threat. And the military gets dragged into politics with a rope tied to its ankle. And Trump didn't exactly help by mixing partisan stuff with military settings. The research mentions an event at Quantico, with hundreds of generals and admirals present, where he reportedly blended political attacks with demands for personal loyalty. That's the kind of thing that makes officers feel trapped. If you don't clap, you're the target. If you do clap, you look like you picked a side. Either way, the uniform loses trust. Then comes the breakdown response. When confronted, Trump doesn't defend the Constitution or explain why he's wronged. He goes after the witness. He calls people traitors. He hints at punishment. The research even notes him suggesting a retired general should face execution for speaking out. That is not a democratic response. That is an authoritarian response. So when retired officers call him a disgrace, that's where it lands. Not because they hate his tax plan or whatever. It's because they think he's flirting with authoritarian control, and they've seen that movie before. And in that movie, the military ends up doing things it can't undo. So zoom out. If the people trained to spot threats say the threat is the guy in charge, what are the rest of us supposed to do with that? When more than 340 retired generals, admirals, and national security heavyweights speak up, that's not politics as usual. That's people who avoided cameras for decades saying, "We'll take the heat now because later the rules might snap." They're basically yelling, "We'd rather look rude today than watch the Constitution get bent tomorrow." So don't treat this like sports. Don't be Team Red, Team Blue, Foam Finger, Nachos. Go read the statements, the letters, the exact quotes, and ask why the stay quiet crowd finally talked. Because if the orange turd keeps testing loyalty, what counts as normal is on us.